Hello everyone, welcome to the 101st Joseki video here on my channel. So I started this playlist on Josekis more than 2 years ago, and I'm surprised I've come this far. But we've only covered about half of all the Josekis there are. So if you're watching from the first video today, it will take you at least a year to really learn all these videos. Maybe 2 years, right? If you do one per week, which I think is a good pace, it will take you 2 years to go through 100 videos. So, of course, take your time. I'm glad a lot of you are beginning to follow this Joseki series. A lot of you have found it helpful and told me about it in the comment section. So I really appreciate your feedback. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing and liking every video that you watch. So this will help the YouTube algorithm introduce my videos to more viewers. And if you're feeling you're gaining a lot from this channel, you're also very welcome, of course, to make a donation via one of the links in the description below. Because unfortunately, my channel is still very far from being able to monetize here on YouTube. So every bit of encouragement is greatly, greatly appreciated. Without further ado, let's get into our topic for the day, and that is this attachment against the one space enclosure from the 3-4 point. In the previous video, we talked about the basics, and I just want to emphasize it a little bit more, because I can imagine very easily that in many Go classrooms around the world, especially in places like China or Korea or Japan, that a lot of teachers will tell kids, it's mostly kids who are learning Go, right? Tell kids that number 1 is the only move they need to know because AI says so, right? And that is problematic. That is why I had the previous video to help us set up the situation, to help us understand what's going on with this one space enclosure. And that is, number 1 is a very intuitive move, and it is a good move under most situations. And for beginner and Q players, it is very much playable because your opponent is not AI. Your opponent is also human, right? So if you played this as a beginner, as white, your opponent is black, might respond with something like this, and you already benefited, right, with this exchange as white, right? Because black, once again, is over-concentrated. Not great. If black plays this, similarly, an exchange between a stone on the 3rd line and a stone on the 2nd line benefits the stone on the 3rd line. So this is already a good exchange. White can place elsewhere. And worse still, if black plays here, right, white gets a very good shape, black still has weaknesses here on the inside. This is a great exchange for white, right? So if you're a beginner, you're going to end up with something like this, and you're going to benefit from number 1. But as you grow stronger, right, if you're a single digit Q or lower down player, your opponent will learn number 2, right? But still, if your opponent doesn't know how to respond to number 3 here, right, if it just connects, then you build a pretty strong base here and gets half the corner, right? This is still very much playable. And you can still play number 1, right, if your opponent keeps playing this way. But as you get stronger, and as your opponents get stronger, your opponent is going to know the correct moves. And this is where you need to worry about number 1. If your opponent knows all these moves, and even knows number 12, which is a really harsh move, right? It's 4, it is for cutting off, these 4 stones on the corner, right? So these are really harsh moves that white can make, that black can make in this situation, right? So if it's something like this, then you're going to have to change the way you play, right? Because your opponent is really strong, your opponent knows what's going on, and this is where number 1 stops working for you. But that will take a long time, right? That will take a long time for you to upgrade. So that is why you have to know the basics. As a human player, you have to know what happens after number 1, right? And similarly, if you want to play on the upper side, number 1, this attachment also works, right? This also works for white. If you really want to play on the upper side, again, everything is situational. So it is not correct to teach beginners And any player who's not familiar with how to approach the one space enclosure, that this is the only correct move. That is not correct from a human perspective, right? It is what AI says, but as a human learner, you have to take it step by step, and you have to upgrade your moves. You have to upgrade your skill set as you improve and as your opponent improves. So let's get into this. We already talked about 3 scenarios. One is for black to simply stand down here. This is the equivalent of black playing the small knight enclosure first, and then having this exchange, right? This little exchange with the shoulder hit. So it's going to be very similar. Just check out my explanation from 3 videos ago. And if black plays here, then also a little slow, it's viable, and white will stand down here. And black will have to most likely play another move, blocking. Right? If you don't, then white will be able to kind of carve out half of the corner, right? Will significantly reduce black's corner territory. So not forceful enough, but of course playable, right? If you're really nervous about your opponent playing at number 1, you can just play this extension at number 2, right? Very solid shape, but of course a little over-concentrated. But as we'll see, black actually has a lot of options, but one of the options is not taking sente. Right? So if black takes sente in this situation, white will get black into this rather ugly shape, ugly and inefficient shape, and this is good for white here on this corner, right? And this is part of the reason why you do not play the pressing attachment against the small knight's approach to the 3-4 point, right? Because this is a little too small. This is simply a little too small for black in this situation. Similarly, if you get to this situation, then this will be the equivalent of playing the pressing attachment, right? So that is why number 1 is semi-forcing. Let's say a lot of times, maybe at least 80% of the time, it is forcing, right? You have to respond as black. If you don't really want to respond, you can play number 2. If you want to play a little toward the upper side, you can play here. Of course, you also have this hane and this hane. 2 more options that we're going to learn today. And at the end of the day, you may not like white in many of these variations, especially as beginners and Q players. And it will be quite obvious once we get to those results. So after number 2, white has mostly 2 choices, maybe 3. Right? You can play this hane, which we'll talk about extensively, or you can play on top. This is not really recommended because you have to be AI, right? You have to be really good at making use of these stones, right? You don't really have a root, right? You don't have a base, and black still has the corner territory and plenty of space to develop on the left side, right? So white is really only playing on the 5th line here. So you have to really know how to use these stones on the 5th line, and it's hard for human players to pull it off. Another move is extending here on the 4th line. It's actually not a terrible move, but it's not recommended. Once again, black doesn't lose anything. Black can still come out on the left side. Number 6 is very big, right? It is the 5th line if you count from the upper side. So still a lot of potential to build on the upper side. And white is not doing much. Just 3 stones on the 4th line, not doing much. Right? So that is why white's best move is to play this hane on the 3rd line, keeping up the pressure on this black group. And what black shouldn't do is connect. Right? If you connect, once again, over-concentrated, and white can actually play away. Right? White can actually play away. Of course, you can connect here or keep building here. These are a lot of options for white. White can also play away, especially when the board is empty. Black the more black plays, the more over-concentrated black is. Right? It simply doesn't make a lot of sense to spend 6 moves here and get to this shape. Right? This is a little too slow. And white is not even afraid of being captured in a panuki. Number 1 and 3, once again, can just be throwaway stones. So white is actually relatively flexible in this situation after black becomes over-concentrated. So black will have to cut here. And now there is a potential ladder. So if the ladder works for black, then white cannot capture these stones this will be a tough fight for white, right? This will be a pretty tough fight for white because black only has one group on the outside, the corner is settled, and white has two groups that are unsettled on the outside. So white will have to calculate this ladder before you play it at number 1, right? That's something to keep in mind. And it's something that a lot of us will definitely forget. But once this happens once or twice in games, we'll remember this, right? You only remember this type of thing through failure, through errors. So that's something to keep in mind. So what if the ladder favors white? What if white can capture number 4? So eventually, right, white will be able to capture this panuki, which is great for white. Right? So this will favor white here in the upper left corner. And that is why black needs to counterattack. 2 ways to do this. One is to play number 6. Another way is to play this Atari. So let's take a look at this Atari first. White must save number 3. Right? It's usually beneficial to save number 3. And now black connects here. White cuts Atari, and this actually already favors white slightly, right? So black will play this Atari, white captures, right? If white plays here, then number 14 is another forcing move, very big endgame move. Right? Number 13 is really slow, so we have to capture here. And black can keep playing on top if it wants to, but white will pull out here, and this will be a fight. Right? Or black can just capture these 2 white stones on a ladder. And white can keep beating on the left side with number 15, or try to split the upper side with number 15 here. Right? So this actually slightly favors white, but it might be a little counterintuitive because the corner territory is black's. Black has a pretty high position, right? Black is not worried about the ladder, right? Because you have the net and number 18. So these 2 stones will be captured regardless of the ladder. But white also has a lot of gains. Right? White has a very solid base here on the left side, and white has a choice of playing on the upper side or keep developing on the left side. So this actually slightly favors white in this situation. But of course, you can disagree as a human player. What about moves like this? Once again, the premise here is that this ladder, right, this ladder will work for white. Right? This ladder against number 4 will work for white. So that is why you don't have number 10, right? After number 9, you can only connect here. There is going to be a lot of problem with this cuts sometime down the line. So black owes a move here on the inside, kind of. And there's a lot of aji. Even if you play this, this is a lot of aji. And this will be a tougher fight for black because black is kind of short on liberties here, right? And white is not. White already is beating a base on the left side. So this is really 1 group against 1, right? Because white is already pretty much settled on the left side. So that's why number 8 seems forceful, seems to be occupying a liberty, but it doesn't work in this situation. So black can only connect here. And we'll get to this exchange. Right? I would say playable for both sides. I would say slightly better for white. So another way for black to proceed is to simply play it right here, number 6. And what happens now is that white will want to exploit this cutting point, right? Because its Atari is forcing, and then you want to extend back out. What happens now is that what white is trying to achieve is actually very simple. Is to sacrifice number 7 and 3. Sacrifice both stones if needed. Could be something like this. And this is already a Joseki, right? So this is going to be very difficult for beginners to understand what's going on, right? We will have number 10 here. Because if you play here, then number 11 is Sente, and white will be able to sacrifice these stones this way. So this is a more forceful way for white to sacrifice. This is a better shape. Right? So if we play here, this is better. This is going to be better. right? So of course, white can once again either start a fight this way, or if black wants to play lower, I think uh, white is happy to give up these stones this way, right? So that's the idea. So once again, it's a little hard to pull off. AI is saying this is perfectly fine. This is about even for both sides. But if you're not good at using these stones on the 6th line here, the 9, 15, you're not going to end up with much benefit down the line as white in this situation, right? So that's something to consider. That's something to keep in mind, right? What about just pulling out and fight? Once again, this will be one black group against 2 white groups. And the trouble here is that these 3 white stones are a little short on liberties, right? So you do not have this honey. You don't have this honey because black can cut, and white is short by 1 liberty. So that's a huge problem in this situation. So white can only extend here, and black can keep pushing, right? If you play the honey, then the cut will be really harsh. And once black presses enough, black can turn to the left side and try to attack these stones, right? We'll press them down, and as long as black stays on top, black will be fine. And white will have a lower position. The corner is still black's territory, and this white group, these 5 stones, are still unsettled. So this is how it's going to play out. Not a good fight, right? So that is why it is better for white to actually give up all these stones. And why is this playable for white? Right, you might be asking, white only has 4 living stones, doesn't have a base, it doesn't have much of anything. So there are a few ways to understand this, right? Number 1, white is in a pretty high position, so that it's the 6th line. So that's not bad, right? It has more influence toward the center, right? That's not bad. Number 2, white has sente. So sente is very important for AI, right? That's why AI doesn't hate it. If white doesn't have sente in the situation, it's not going to be a viable Joseki for white. So white has sente, white can play elsewhere. Number 3, there are other ways for white to keep building, right? One is to play number 13 and 15, right? This is another way to strengthen white's influence on the outside. And black is a little short on liberties here. If black doesn't keep playing, white can further enclose black right here on the left side. Right? So this is how white can potentially proceed here on the left side. And then on the corner, white also has this attachment. Right? Once again, we've seen this in one of the previous videos. Number 17 is pretty big for the corner territory. So most likely, if black wants the corner territory, then white can enclose black here on the upper side and build on the upper side with these moves. So there are subsequent follow-ups that white can play. That is why it's not a total failure. Far from it for white. It's still playable for white. But once again, as a beginner, as a Q player, can you pull this off as white? That's doubtful, right? That's a little doubtful. So that's why you need to be a little careful when you're choosing how to approach the one-space enclosure. So I think that is all we need to cover for number 2, this honey on the 3rd line. Now let's look at this honey on the 5th line. What should whites do in this situation? White should definitely come into the corner. Right? You cannot play on the outside. Right? If it's something like this, then these 2 stones are not doing much. These 3 stones are not doing much. And black has a very good position. This is the 6th line, if you count from the upper side, and black can develop on the upper side. So white will have to try to come into the corner this way. So what should black do? One thing black cannot do is to, once again, get into this shape. This is a bad shape for black and a pretty light shape for white here on the outside. So this is going to be good for white. And number 3, it's not worth saving. Right? This is not worth saving. It's very small. So white has sente in this situation. White has already done what it wants, right? Which is to stop black from developing on the left side. That's what number 1 is aiming to do. So white already has what it wants. White has sente. Can either play here or maybe on the upper side, something like that. Perfectly fine. So not great for black. So black's first choice, once again, is to cut here and play the Atari. You have to play the Atari here, right? If you play this, then this is not okay. This is not okay. You're getting, once again, enclosed. Maybe this, or maybe you play here. None of this is fine for black, right? You're getting enclosed. You're getting in this shape, and everything is short on liberties. Not great for black. So black will have to play this Atari. White extends, right? You have to extend here. And black will have to connect. If you don't, then you'll be pushed through, and black's shape will be broken. And what should white do in this situation? Should you try to live this way? Not really, right? It's a little too small. So it's actually better for white to simply play on the outside and give up these two stones. Right, so this is actually playable for both sides. Not bad at all for white. Not bad at all for white, because once again, you have a strong wall. You stopped black from developing on the left side, which is what number 1 sets out to do. Right? But the problem with this is that the choice is in black's hand. Right? So black can choose to take the corner this way, or black can choose to give white the corner. So after number 4, after this connection, white can no longer play on the outside. We play on the outside, and this shape is much better, right? Because white doesn't get to play the Atari. This shape is a very efficient, very nice shape for black all of a sudden. And white, once again, is not doing a whole lot on the left side. The shape is simply not right. After number 4, white must come inside the corner. And now black will play the Atari on the outside. Right? If you play here, then the corner is already reduced, and white comes out on the 4th line. So this is going to be pretty good for white. So black plays the Atari on the outside, and if white wants to take the corner, it will play this way. Black at Sente, black can play elsewhere, of course. Black can also play this move if it can win the ko, right? If it doesn't have enough ko threats, standing down here is also really, really big, right? For surrounding territory on the upper side. So I think this is really, really solid for black. This is really good for black on the outside. And it is really black's choice. So if you don't like that as white, you have to connect here. But black will come into the corner, and white will have to keep crawling, right, on the left side. This is not great. Right? This is not ideal for white, because white is on the 3rd line here on the left side, and black has a pretty strong wall on the outside. Or, if black is really strong on the left side, black can even play number 10, right? Something like that. And this will be a tough fight. White will have to want to come out, and black can keep building on the left side or toward the center. So this is going to be a pretty tough fight. It might be something like this. Yeah. So not ideal, really not ideal for white. So white might as well just take the corner, and play something like this. So as you can see, it's really black's choice on where to play the hane, 5th line or 3rd line, and how the exchange is going to be, right? In this situation, black exchanged the corner territory for influence on the outside. And personally, I really like black in this situation. But of course, getting the corner is always going to be pretty big. The only other variation that I think that is worth covering for beginners and Q players is what about white doesn't save number 3. Right? So usually when you have this Panuki on the outside as black, it's not going to be bad, right? Of course, getting number 9 and 10 is good for white in this situation. You might be thinking, right, if something like this, then white takes the corner, right? This is a big turnaround because it's 10 plus points, almost 15 points of black's territory to begin with, and now this is almost 15 points of territory for whites, right? So that's a 30-point turnaround. And of course, black gets the wall on the outside, also very valuable. I'd say at least 20, maybe 30 points, right? But still, it's a pretty pretty big turnaround. And black may not like this, right? Black may not like this. But the thing with this pattern is that black has a choice. Black can actually play the 3 free points after this Atari and kind of give up the stone on the outside. But what's important is that black also has number 18 and 20, right, to kind of connect from the outside. And this is going to be these 5 stones on the outside, so pretty solid shape. And white's wall is not ideal, right? White's wall is not ideal. So this is actually slightly better for black. Compare this with some other patterns. Let's see if black plays number 6 right here. That's not the correct move, right? Because now what white can do is once again swallow the corner. And 1 and 5 are not completely dead yet, right? So if it's something like this, then once again, white takes a corner, really big turnaround, and black most likely will still owe a move here sometime down the line, right? So this is going to be okay for white. And in this situation, black actually doesn't have this option. Right? Playing here will be very, very different because black has cut black in 2. Right? So the corner territory is not as big for black, and black will still come under attack with number 15. Right? You have to play number 16 to stay alive. And that's a very good exchange for white. Right? A stone on the 3rd line and a stone on the 2nd line. So this is how it's going to be. Right? So there are subtle differences, but when black plays the Atari, white usually does not benefit from sacrificing the stone. So that is why you need to stand down here. And as we saw, this is going to be the Joseki. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. Good luck to you all, and thank you for watching.